Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Joanne and I for another episode of The Shadow Stuff, A Journey Within. Hey, Joanne.
Hi, Todd.
How you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you. Very excited about our guest today.
I know I am too. So, as Joanne said, we're really excited about our next guest. It's Josh Trent. Josh is the founder of Wellness Force with over 14 years in the health and wellness industry. Josh leads the wellness community in discovering physical and emotional intelligence to help men and women live life well. He is the host of the Wellness Force radio podcast, where he has awesome discussions about a wide array of wellness topics. You can also find him on the Wellness Force community on Facebook. Hey, Josh, welcome.
Guys, thank you so much. What a great introduction. So excited about this conversation.
Well, we're really excited you're here. We're very honored that you are spending time with us today. Um, Josh, would you mind sharing with the listeners a little bit about what got you excited to be in the wellness field and why?
My path to wellness actually came from fitness. A lot of people start with this catalyst of moving their body. And I think that's my path as well. I was, a young kid. I didn't necessarily have the tools psychologically, physiologically, health and wellness and nutrition wasn't a conversation in my house when I was a kid. And so, without that education, without those really knowledge blocks that I could build a really healthy wall on, to no surprise, I'm 21 years old and I'm 280 pounds. I'm in this career. I was actually an auto mechanic, which not a lot of people know. And I was hating my body, not in the right relationship, in a job that I despised. And I just had this moment when I was at a party. I'll never forget this. A lot of people check out with alcohol. And that's what I was doing when I was 21. And I slammed this red party cup down on a table. I had tried to lose weight multiple times before, and I just felt this lightning bolt come through me. It was almost as if it was a message from God. It was a message from higher intelligence. And it was this feeling and this narrative of there is so much more to life than this. There's so much more to life than being unhappy in my body and using things to numb out. And so I literally slammed the party cup down and I ran home drunk for 3 miles. I ran home drunk. I flipped open the laptop. This is 2001. And I think I typed in, how do I be healthy? How do I lose weight? The next 18 months was trial by fire. I lost and gained 80 pounds plus and minus. And then I got to this point where I just felt so just frustrated with my life in general that I moved to Hawaii. And in Hawaii, I was there for 6 months and I really understood what it was like to be present in my own body and to be present in my own mind and my own heart. And I went down this path of being a trainer. I'll never forget this. This is another moment in my wellness journey. I was at a gym and a fitness manager saw me working out. And he's like, hey, I've seen you have good results. Have you thought about being a trainer? And I turned to him and I was like, what's a trainer? I didn't even know what personal training was. That led me on the path for 10 years and, coaching over 10,000 sessions in gyms and then kind of understanding that fitness is a viable piece of really what I believe that is wellness. And Wellness Force was a product of my journey. But taking it to the beginning, guys, it was really being in an environment that was not conducive to wellness and feeling the pain of that. And then that was my early motivation and fire to be where I am now.
That's pretty awesome. It's interesting how you have that aha moment and then, everything just progresses from there. When you put forth the positive intention and, making changes for yourself, the universe will come back at you and tenfold and open the doors and they'll just fly open. And then one thing leads to another. So how did the Wellness Force come to fruition?
Yeah. So 2012, I had been training for so long that I was really burnt out. And I think a lot of people can relate to this. David Dita talks about between one layer of purpose and another, sometimes there's a gap, there's a space. And I found myself in that space where my purpose of being a trainer and catalyzing people's bodies through fitness was over. And I felt it in my deepest core. But yet I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do next. Is 2011, 12, Facebook and social media was just kind of beginning its upswing. And I started to see all these people that I was studying, that I was respecting, that I thought were up to great things in the world, that were healing and uplifting our collective consciousness. And I thought, how do I do that? So I teamed up with one of my original mentors, Sean Croxton from Underground Wellness. We started to create videos together. I started to explore what this world was to help more than one person at a time, like we're doing today on this podcast. And I got really excited about what was possible. And I founded Wellness Force because I really believe that we are two parts. We're this physical and this emotional. And so Wellness Force is this discovering process, discovering this physical and emotional intelligence so that all of us can live our lives well. And so Wellness Force was a spark from how do I take what I've done for 10 years working as a trainer and a health and fitness pro, and how do I multiply that so it helps more people? And that's really what Wellness Force Collective is all about.
Yes, it is. It's the mind, body, spirit, and being able to work through and realize that we have to be our true, authentic selves and remove those masks that we hide behind. And, things change dramatically. So, Joanne?
I have to say, I agree. And just listening to your story, I've listened that you have removed two of your masks in very large aha moments. Well, first, when you were 21 and you said it bolted right up your arm. And then again in 2011, 2012, where you had to change because you felt you needed to get into the emotional part of it, not only for yourself, but for the world, for the people around you that you were training. So you were removing masks for yourself, but then you said, I need to help others remove those masks. Let's hit the emotional part of it. That's wonderful. That's again, and we're all collectively working together what we want to do. And like Todd mentioned before, we watched your Facebook Live with Allison for the Me Too movement. And
Yeah.
we feel strongly about that and how you projected into that, the emotional component of that let's get to the emotions of that let's not forget the men. Let's all work collectively in that. So I'm so psyched that you're here to share your story.
That video was something that came through based on request, and I think just a swirling energy. I live here in Encinitas. It's like this spiritual bubble where there's constantly conversations about Me Too and collective uprising and things like this. It's not that case in the rest of the United States. I'm not sure about your community, Todd and Joanne, but the conversations that happen here are on the bleeding edge, and I like those conversations because I feel like what we're seeing with the Me Too movement is that yes, there is a problem that deserves phenomenal respect and attention. And there also is a solution that deserves attention as well. And I think if you look at the work of Gretchen Rubin and you understand what emotional contagion is, it's almost like emotions that are osmotically drawn to one another. We understand that the reason that people get caught up in a swirl is because they have pain in their past. Every one of us, all of us, have somewhat of a pain body that we've either healed from or in the course of healing from now. And so if we understand that Me Too is sparking emotions in people, memories in people, past pain bodies in people, not just women, but also men, Me Too is nothing to do with just the singular focus of women's bodies being respected and no means no. I mean, I think that's how Me Too started. I believe Me Too started with no means no and respect a woman's power and give respect to a woman when she puts up a healthy boundary, which of course, that's the most important thing. And that deserves complete attention and respect. But what we see now is that Me Too has bled into everyone else's pain body. In other words, if anybody's ever been disrespected or got drunk and made a bad decision or did anything at all that was, quote, deemed by some of the really, really hardcore, I don't want to use the word left because I don't believe in division, but I believe that there are hardcore movements that kind of spring up inside of movements that are pure in their beginning, like Me Too. And it's a very nuanced conversation, you guys, this Me Too movement. I think it started out one way, and now we find it in 2018 to be something completely different that's almost in a way trying to divide, trying to make men fight women and women fight men. And the reality is we get to put the shields and swords down and find this healing and the solution together.
I agree 100%. And that we have to communicate. We have to come together in balance because we need to work together in the male and female, the yin, the yang, the god, the goddess, because without one, we're not going to have the other. And you were so powerful on that. And I agree 100% with what you just said, that the emotional bodies, we are all have that, and it's not healed, so therefore there's sickness, there's not wellness. In order to get well, we have to hit the emotion. So I'd like you to elaborate on that because you have such a wellness force. the emotional body has to be healed in order for us to be healthy. If you could elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, I mean, and this is such the undercurrent of everything. So if we look at the holistic model, yes, the symptom is a symptom, but the symptom isn't the cause. So way below, maybe the analogy is better for the roots of a tree. The roots of a tree are plugged into the earth. And so at the core, the roots of the emotional healing that must happen when we look at Me Too is really understanding the intentionality and the heart centeredness and honestly, the way we want to be with one another. How do men want to treat women? And what kind of pain is a man who's disrespecting a woman or crossing a boundary that was set by a woman, or, just an incredibly absurd thing for a man to do, which would ever be doing rape or any of these things? I cannot imagine any of my friends or any of my friends' friends or any of my friends' friends crossing that boundary line. Yet it happens all the time. And so we can't turn our head away from it. But we also don't want to focus on it and saturate ourselves and kind of bathe in the collective pain body, because then we all just get angry. Then we all start rising to the surface and nothing ever changes. So in order for us to change, we first must take a massive, deep breath as a collective. When we breathe enough, we'll get down to that root. Going back to the analogy of the tree in the dirt, when we're at the roots, then we can understand, okay, what type of training do we need for young men? Do we instill across the United States for 18-year-old, 17-year-old, 19-year-old men a way for them to learn what is emotional intelligence? How can I have healing within myself? And what are the ways that I get to, not have to, but what are the ways that I get to treat women that are in my age group? I think this is really what we're looking at here. The emotional side of Me Too has everything to do with the perpetrator or the man who's disrespecting the boundary, his healing, his intentionality, what he's gone through. And honestly, even the education that he doesn't have. If he doesn't know that he doesn't know, well, we can't really be mad at him. He's still doing something atrocious, but yet, what does he really need? He needs to be woken up. He needs to be educated. He needs to be healed.
Correct. That's correct. And I also believe that women who are abusers towards men need that as well. There's duality in that because there are women who also are abusers. So they have to, they have to be taught as well. So
Yeah.
it goes back to what you said in earlier, that it's not just one sided.
Yeah, I mean, Me Too has every side of a coin has two sides. It's like even so one side has many sides within it. Nothing's ever black and white, right? Nothing's ever. I think in our world, people love easy concepts. Our subconscious mind always wants to have things be black or white, beginning, middle, end. Well, if you look at this is really cool. This relates to what we're talking about. So I'm in the hallway of my grandpa's home. I'm like 13 years old, and he said, "Josh, you going to church?" And I was like, "No, Grandpa, I'm not going to church," because I had a big story around how, religion was evil and all it does is divide people. And he said, there's no space in a man's mind or in the human mind to understand what it would be like to have something be all encompassing, timeless, and not have a beginning, middle, and end. Because in our logical brain, we have to have everything have a start, a middle, and a finish. But what's interesting about healing and about our collective is that what if there was never a beginning and there's never an end? What if that was real and our logical mind could not even comprehend it? So, in other words, Me Too, the healing for men, if they don't know, then they don't know. If we don't know that there's greater forces out there, that we're not just here in our little myopic world, that we're part of something way bigger, that's the kind of conversation that is going to wake people up, that is going to start the narrative around the healing for not just Me Too, but our collective consciousness, the way we treat one another. And right now, with all we have as far as technology and all the information we have, I believe we're behind. I think the way we treat each other in this world is far behind the technology and the informational sharing aspects that we should be. I think we should be a lot further along.
That was a really powerful statement, and that you have to take all collectively all emotions, the mental, emotional, spiritual, collectively all the emotions, because if we don't have all the emotions, we really don't know what someone's issue is or what the problem is. In order to get to wellness, you have to dive deeper. into what the root of the problem is.
Yeah.
So, and because you are into wellness, I'm sure, have you found that with people that someone might be 280 pounds and might be doing everything right collectively, but there might be an emotional issue that you have to figure out before the weight will come off or before they'll eat healthy, because there might be an emotional component or something that you haven't hit on. You have to hit all body parts, all physical layers, all mass, I guess is what I'm asking, if you could elaborate on that.
I love where we're at because about 4 years ago, I watched a film. It was from the Representation Project. It was called The Mask That You Live In. And it was about the kind of narrative around these boys and young men struggling to stay true to themselves while being in America. And the research showed that compared to girls, boys in the United States are more likely to be diagnosed with behavior disorders or take stimulants and fail out of school and be criminals and also suicide, unfortunately. Now, what's interesting about this is because the narrative we've had for so long is that of John Wayne and Gary Cooper, the strong, silent type that don't ever talk about how they feel. They don't ever explore any negative emotions. It's this meme I'm sure you both have seen where it's like good vibes only. Well, I can't think of a more BS thing to push. Life is not always good vibes. And to drive a narrative where we're only going to have good vibes and there's no room to allow ourselves to have permission to take an emotional inventory, to feel the feelings that aren't always sexy, to actually explore why those emotions are there in the first place, nothing will ever happen with people's health goals or wellness goals or longevity goals. You're not going to go there. The only way we heal is if we take a breath, take a space, and take a pause to take the emotional inventory. And that inventory is a process that I've come through. I have a really specific way that I do it personally. Mine might be different than, yours or Todd's, but we all need an inventory because if you don't take an inventory in a business, you go out of business.
Very true. And I love the way how you stated that very clearly. Like, there are so many people with addictions, whether it be alcohol, whether it be drugs, whether it be food. They have addictions. Some people have sex addictions, but they have addictions because they're not taking the toll of what that emotional category is. It could be grief. It could be something that you stated earlier in the interview, something that happened in their childhood. They carry it with them, so they're not taking the emotional inventory of the why. What is it? What is the core? What is the root? What mask? And we keep putting mask over layer over layer. So if we peel those off, take those off, get to it, we can heal. We can correct, solve the issue, get to the goal. Is it wellness? Is it health? Is it fitness? Is it abundance? Is it a family? We can get there if we all collectively work together and around the world, around the globe. Get on your wellness force. Find you. I encourage the listeners, like the page, collectively work together. We can make this happen. That's our goal.
Yeah, and the collective part is the challenge, really. What you guys are doing, the conversation you're having, the direction that you're taking words for people to feel something. I mean, I always believe that everything that happens as far as change is a thought, then a feeling, then an action. But we have to say words that make people think. People need to think differently right now because this is a totally different experience here on planet Earth. So, this continuum of thought, feeling, action over and over and over again, that is almost the sharpening of a sword for our entire collective, where if we don't sharpen the sword, then we become blunt. We start making poor decisions because our decision-making faculty isn't sharp. And so that's why podcasting right now is so important, to constantly sharpen our swords.
It makes people take responsibility and ownership and make decisions on their own stuff. They have to own it. It's theirs. It's their responsibility. If, it's like, hey, wait, is that my responsibility? No, it's yours. Take ownership, make decisions. Have
Yes.
and what is your attitude around it? Is your attitude good? Is it bad? Were you conscious when you made that decision, or did you just make that because you were pissed off? So you're right. The verbiage is very important nowadays too.
Yeah, the words are everything, right? If we use the wrong words, for example, one thing I always do is I check myself to make sure that I have a difference between have and get. The word have to is very heavy. It's like, I have to work out. I have to eat well. I have to sleep. I have to give my significant other a hug. It's like, no, you don't. You get to do all those things. You get to do all those things. You get to make some eggs. You get to eat some spinach. You get to give your wife or your husband a hug. Like, you don't have to do any of those things. But what happens is when we're overloaded, when we're experiencing stress or overwhelm or pain, we forget that we don't actually have to do anything. We're choosing to do all these things. So I really, and that's a continuum for me. I think I've even on this podcast already, I've said we have to maybe a few times, but that's a big one. The power of words and the difference between have to and get to. I think if we all practice just that one thing, it might really shift people.
And I think too that the body language is the big important factor as well. How we hold ourselves as we're talking, things like that. I think that can be misconstrued as well, along with the verbiage.
Yeah, I'm standing right now. I mean, I'm at a standing desk, so my feet are, shoulder width apart. My shoulders are back. I'm breathing. I have my water. I'm in good posture. Posture is such a big deal because when we're slumped forward, the body is sending out a message that it doesn't need to express itself. I mean, expression comes from our throat and expression comes from us speaking through our diaphragm. Well, if we're slumped forward, if we're not in good posture, then we can't have diaphragmatic breathing. We can't have real expression through our throat. It's just not possible. So it's just really, I know we're exploring nuances around this emotional intelligence side. But really what this is all about is returning back home. We're all going back home. We're either fighting it or we're flowing with it. And what I define as home is a living through an ancestral lens. Tradition exists for a reason. The reason that our ancestors were able to succeed and learn and fail and succeed and learn and fail is because they did the work. We have so much to learn from them. And yet we're so advanced here with our technology and our information sharing. We're forgetting about our lineage. We're forgetting about our ancestry. We're not looking at our life through an ancestral lens anymore. Our ancestors, they breathed, they ate, and they slept. They didn't have social media and incessant calendar appointments that woke them up all day. All they did was, have sustenance that they were looking for, which was a huge part of their day. Then they had human connection, and then they had real presence, right? Now, they also had to defend themselves from other things, animals and whatnot, but it was just a different way of living. And so now we need to have both. We get to have both of an ancestral living model and this technology piece, because they're both important when we look at the collective healing. The beast and the spirit both deserve respect and attention.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that. That was so powerful what you just said, Josh. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really do believe we're half beast and half spirit. I think those two things must be in the spotlight at all times.
Beauty and the Beast.
Yep.
That's a title for a reason, right?
Oh yeah, I'm good. I think we're complete. We should end on that. That's fantastic.
Great.
You were wonderful.
So, Josh, at this point, could you share with the listeners any experiences that you might have had in working with mask or shadow self?
Yeah, the shadow self. The shadow self is, I believe that the metaphor that most fits is the story of the two wolves. And I'm sure you've heard of this before, but I'll go over it quickly here. There was a chief, and he was talking to his young, I think it was son or just a member of the tribe. And he was telling this story about, wolves. One of them is anger and lust and jealousy and betrayal and murder. And then there's another wolf that's love and abundance and trust. And the young boy looked at the chief and he was like, well, which one wins? And he turns to the young man and he says, the one you feed. And I feel like that's really what we're talking about here with our shadow. For some reason, which I'm still honestly coming to grips with, it bothers me some days, and then some days I just flow with it. The creator, the higher intelligence, God, whatever you want to say, the thing that put us here or that keeps us here, for some reason designed it so that our life, we would always have this yin yang, this fire and ice, this feminine masculine, this plus and minus. And that is really the narrative of the shadow self. Like my shadow self wants me to be depressed. It wants me to lay around my house. It wants me to talk bad about myself. It wants me to eat a bunch of crappy food. That shadow, that dark part of myself, I believe what's really in the shadow is all the things that happened to me when I was a little kid. If I didn't get love, if I was abused, if something happened to me, whatever it is, like we spend our whole adult lives healing from what happens to us in the first 10 years of it. And I think that the more we start talking about that as a country, as a collective, the more we're going to shine light on the shadow of ourself, because the darkness is where everything broods and grows and kind of just like sits in really its own putrefaction. Like the only reason that darkness stays dark is because there's fear to shine light on it. But it's like the very act of shining light, attention, conversation on the dark parts of ourselves, the more we can heal, the more we can allow, there's metaphors of don't be concerned about your cracks, because through a crack is where the light gets in. So we have these imperfections in life, and talking about our imperfections, talking about our community together and one another and what we're sharing and the thresholds that we're crossing together and just being real. People are so afraid right now to just be real, to talk about where they're actually at, because everyone has to have a boasting facade of, we got it all figured out. We know exactly what we're doing. And you should listen to me because I have the perfect path. Well, I'm here to tell you, my friends, there is no perfect path. And anybody that acts like they have it all figured out probably has the biggest, darkest shadow self you could ever imagine. And look, we all get to work on our shadow self.
That's so true. And emotions again play a great part in that, because I will use myself as an example. I feel emotions to the utmost degree. If I'm happy, I am happy. But if I am angry, look out. And being a female, people say, oh, women don't show anger. Don't do that. You have to stuff it and hide it. And I'm like, nope, I'm angry. I'm going to show it. So I educate people to show all of those emotions, every single emotion. So, like what you just said, we're taught so young, between what infancy to age 7 or 10, not to show those emotions, or we're screwed up in those ages, basically. so,
Yeah.
so,
Well, think about this. Think about this, right? What's the first thing that most parents say, especially to a young boy when the boy is crying? What do they say? They say, oh, it's okay. Don't cry. It's
exactly.
okay. Don't cry. So I can distinctly, I was in athletics in high school. So I played a lot of football. I mean, the narrative in football was suck it up and get out there, throw some dirt on it. There's no room to talk about how you feel. Now, on the other side of the sword, right? Football and athletics are so pivotal and so impactful for people in so many ways. But this emotional part of young men in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, it's shifting here, and it gets to shift because I think almost in a way, to tie this back, Me Too is happening because of the lack of emotional intelligence in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And that was left over from another ripple. It's almost like evolution goes through all these ripples in a lake of consciousness, and it starts with a huge rock. 200, 300 years ago, women were owned. I mean, can you imagine this? Can you imagine owning another human being? Like, what the hell is going on? And now we're at this space where, women 100 years ago, like, just were able to vote. And so it's just this ripple. We're in the ripple and we're progressing, we're evolving. And with the exponential technologies that we have and the way that you and I and Todd are able to connect on a podcast, we get to grow faster now because technology can allow us to do that.
Oh, that's so true. So true. And Todd, you have your own personal story about that as a young boy.
Yeah, as a young boy, I had some hearing challenges, and at age 5, hearing aids come onto the scene. And of course, I had lived in a semi-silent world for the previous 5 years. So, I taught myself to read lips. My family didn't really know that I had a hearing problem until I got into school and I had the hearing test and all the stuff to get entered into school. And they realized that I had a hearing problem and hearing aids come onto the scene. So that kind of shifted my whole world into a hearing type thing. It was a learning curve for me, and I struggled. And I was trying to, make sure that I was hearing things correctly. So I'd ask a lot of questions. And my dad had said to me one day, you know, kids are to be seen and not heard unless spoken to. Well,
Wow.
wow. Like, wow. Of course, that was a very popular adage back when I was a young kid that a lot of parents said that. And it's like, I really took that to heart. So that meant that I had no voice. I had to be quiet. I had
Yeah.
no opinion. I had nothing. So I lived my life that way, up until this point when working with my shadow self and realizing that was my shadow. I allowed my shadow to direct my life story. And once I made friends with it and worked and peeled the layers away of the onion and realized that was part of the core, now I have a voice. I'm not intimidated by authority figures any longer. I am one with myself and with, working with everyone else. We're all equal. And that was my story. And like you said, Josh, like you said earlier, that everyone's story is different, everybody's journey is different, and
Yeah.
but still, that was a big thing for me. Until we realize and take ownership. Once we know better, we do better.
Yeah.
So it just comes to the point where, as you said, Joanne, earlier, we take ownership for things, and it's not anyone else's fault. It's not, we have to work with ourselves and take ownership, and to try to make ourselves better in a collective consciousness.
I mean, Todd, you're talking about a blind spot as a nation, as a world. It's something that I learned from my landmark training. I've done 2 emotional intelligence trainings that have really helped me so much. The first one was Landmark, the forum, and the next one was Mastery and Transformational Training. It was a 2 stints of 5 days of an intensive. And what I realized for so many people is that phrase, they don't even know they don't know. It's a blind spot. It's like when you're driving down the road and you look in your mirror, but there might be a blind spot that's about 2 feet wide and there might be a car there or an object there. Well, bad things are going to happen. You're going to get in accidents. Life is going to push you to grow because you don't know that you don't know. And the only way that you're going to know is through a conversation like this or by experiencing the deep, dark contrast that God or the universe wants to give you, because we're all evolving. We actually don't know why we're here. We're all trying to figure this thing out. And I mean, that's the truth, right? We're all trying to understand why we're here on the planet. Now, I'm not attached to figuring that out, but it's my work to let it go. It used to trigger me, you guys. Like, I used to be so upset. Like, why are we here on planet Earth? I don't understand. Like, why are we on the planet? Like, why did God put us here? What is this? Rah, rah, rah. And then I realized that was just my ego wanting safety and security. Well, the reality is, in order for us to live a life of abundance and to actually feel alive, we can't always know the answers. Because if we knew all the answers, there'd be no point to living. There'd be no fun to the game. Now, there's ways to play the game better than others, which is why we're here on this podcast. But at the end of the day, like, we don't really know. And so if we start acting like we know everything, then we're going to be in a space of that blind spot.
So true. Very well said, Josh. Thank you.
And I'd like to review and go back to what you said earlier about the shadow self, and that if people don't work it or think that they have their shadow self all figured out, that they probably have one of the darkest shadow selves, because
Yeah.
um, I really liked how you said that. I've been sitting with that, and it's been just really going around in my brain, because there are people who just think it's so negative and they don't do the shadow work, and they won't touch upon it, they won't talk about it, they won't work it, they won't bring it into anything. So I really like how you touched on that. If you have more to elaborate on that, I would appreciate it for the podcast, the listeners, and
Yeah.
collaboratively. I really like that.
Yeah, the what I like to call it, the real work or something tactical that people can implement today, like when they put their phone down or whatever they're doing, do an emotional inventory. Okay, you're going to have a relationship with your shadow self your whole life. You may as well get to know it. So after a shower or a workout, um, do the workout and then the shower. Then eat some quality nutrition. Then give yourself a date. Take yourself out on a date for 2 hours. Go to a park or a quiet space. Turn off all electronics. Just sit there. Do 7 rounds of box breathing. Now, box breathing is when you inhale for 5, you hold for 5, you exhale for 5, and you pause for 5, the shape of a box. Do 7 rounds of that. That's going to reset your nervous system. It's going to shift you to more of a parasympathetic for your nervous system. Open a blank journal page. Draw a line down the middle. It's going to be a fairly large journal. On the left side, write 10 things that you want to be different in your life. Literally, what are 10 things that are festering in you? What are 10 things or people or experiences? What are 10 things that you want different in your life? On the right side, write down all the people, habits, energy, and actions that must change in order for you to get the peace and fulfillment you desire. So on the left side, 10 things you want different. On the right side, all the people, habits, and energy and ways of being that must change. They must change. Or you could say they get to change, however you want to do it. Once you've done the full inventory, take another massive deep breath and just pick one thing. Pick one thing out of those 10 that you're committed to changing in the next 7 days. Then take another breath and ask yourself, who can I call in? What community can I be a part of? What can I do to move through this threshold of fear? Because fear is keeping you in that space from taking the inventory anyways. I mean, this is a really scary moment for a lot of people, like taking an inventory, box breathing and taking my phone off for 2 hours and writing down in a journal. Like, this is all scary stuff for a lot of people. But you do that. You go down that road of identifying out of the 10, what is the one thing that I'm committed to in the next 7 days, and watch how your relationship shifts with your shadow self. Because whatever's in there, whatever's in the shadow is your inner child, your inner boy, your inner girl, just wanting to be heard. Your inner child just wants to be heard. And we can't spend our lives silencing that child, because they're going to yell at us later, and it's going to come with interest. You know, we're going to spaz out at our spouse, or we're going to treat other people the way we don't want to be treated because that child inside is not being heard. And so that's the real inventory that I think everyone gets to have.
I like that. That's a great exercise, and I encourage everybody to do that. Definitely do that. Very good exercise.
Well, guys, this has been an awesome conversation. I've really enjoyed talking with you both. I'm afraid we're going to have to kind of wrap it up. But Josh, if the listeners wanted to reach out to you, could you give them the information and how they could reach out to you?
Yes. If you're doing work on the shadow self, talk to our community. It's been really cool to have Todd and Joanne in the Wellness Force community. Just go to wellnessforce.com/group. And that'll take you to our Facebook group, and you can add it in there. We always do a show where we explore topics like this on Wednesdays on Facebook Live. And then Wellness Force Radio is every Tuesday and every Friday for emotional and physical intelligence. So Wellness Force pretty much everywhere on the interwebs.
Thank you. I will add that into the show notes. So when this podcast is posted, the listeners will be able to see that information. So to kind of recap our discussion, Josh, could you give the listeners some positive advice or positive words to kind of recap?
Yeah. Wherever you are, you're taking yourself with you. So just changing your environment is not always going to change your way of being. I learned that when I went to Hawaii. I changed my body, I changed my environment, but I hadn't changed my relationship with my shadow self. And so take a breath, take the time, take the inventory of how you can grow your relationship and your understanding of your shadow self, because it's going to be there forever. It's going to be there until you leave this world. So you may as well lock arms with it.
Great advice. Thank you for sharing that, Josh. So, listeners, I hope you enjoyed our episode this evening. I hope you got some really good information. If you'd like to get in touch with us and have any questions or comments, please do so. That information will be in the show notes. Everybody, have a great evening.